Do you want to uncover the darker side of ancient Egypt, the side your textbooks never dare to mention? Beyond the golden death masks and the glossy tours of the pyramids, Cleopatra's world was built on practices that would shock modern sensibilities. Sexual customs weren't about pleasure. They were about power, preserving bloodlines, and fulfilling religious duty. Royal siblings married each other as a matter of policy, not passion. Temple prostitution was a state-sponsored economy. Contraception involved mixtures of honey and even crocodile dung. But which of these accounts are propaganda, and which are carved into papyri and tomb walls? If you value history told through documented evidence, this is the channel for you. Subscribe now to support our work, and tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. This story is drawn from research and historical sources, including Herodotus and preserved Egyptian papyri. Let's go back to where it begins. In the royal houses of Egypt, incest wasn't a shameful secret. It was official policy. The Ptolemaic dynasty ruled Egypt for 3 centuries, securing the throne by wedding brother to sister, generation after generation. Cleopatra VI married her younger brother, Ptolemy XI, when she was 18 and he was just 10. It raised no eyebrows. Her own great-grandmother, Cleopatra II, had even married both of her sons in succession. Keeping the bloodline pure was the ultimate shield for the throne. But DNA studies of Ptolemaic mummies show the price of this obsession. Congenital defects, shortened lifespans, and fertility issues nearly ended the dynasty twice over. The marriage contract between Cleopatra and young Ptolemy XI, still preserved on papyrus in a Berlin museum, states that their wedding night must occur once the boy turned 13. At dawn, a sacred ram's horn would sound, and the act would be witnessed. Temple priests recorded every royal consummation, dates, duration, and whether a pregnancy followed. One fragment from the Serapeum even details Cleopatra's wedding night. It lasted from sunset until 3 hours past midnight. 6 high priests and the royal physician bore witness. Afterward, the boy king needed medical attention. His doctor's notes survive, prescribing treatment for bleeding and shock with willow bark extract and opium juice. Temple prostitution wasn't some fringe activity. It was state business. The sacred prostitutes of Aphrodite in Memphis generated enough silver to fund temple construction and pay priestly salaries. Herodotus claimed every Egyptian woman had to serve once in the temple before marriage. Scholars still debate whether that meant all women or only certain classes. But the economic records don't lie. Account books from Edfu and Dendera list steady payments to sacred women. Room rentals, purchases of perfumes, tax receipts from their earnings. One Roman-era papyrus pegs the fee at 2 drachmas per client, more than an unskilled laborer's daily wage. Temples even kept client registers. Scrolls list over 400 regulars by name, profession, and service preference. Marcus Aurelius Apollodorus, a grain merchant from Cyrene, visited monthly, paying 5 drachmas for a full Hathor ritual. Camwis, a priest of Ptah, sought purification through the sacred union of the moon gods 12 years in a row. Certain positions were so holy that temples charged extra. A sexual rite dedicated to Set cost 3 additional drachmas. Oral acts for Taret required ritual cleansing afterward in double the usual rate. These sacred women underwent years of training. One Demotic papyrus describes their education: 5 years to master 27 sexual positions, each tied to a deity or astronomical event. They memorized prayers in Egyptian, Greek, and Latin. Daily exercises strengthened pelvic muscles and flexibility. Their diets excluded foods believed to affect body odor or taste. Graduation required a public demonstration before temple authorities. Failure meant being reassigned to lesser temple duties: cooking, cleaning, or serving. Egyptian medicine blended science with ritual. The Kahin gynecological papyrus, written around 1800 BCE but still in use in Cleopatra's time, prescribed vaginal suppositories made from crocodile dung and honey. The acidity acted as a spermicide. Wealthier women preferred cotton soaked in acacia gum, which modern chemistry confirms contains natural spermicidal compounds. The Ebers papyrus lists contraceptive formulas using dates, honey, and frankincense. For abortion, women drank mixtures with juniper oil and mercury, dangerous, but sometimes effective. Temple physicians carefully logged which recipes ended pregnancies without killing the mother. The Septuagint Medical Papyrus records 137 abortions performed in 6 years of Cleopatra's reign. The success rate was 82%. 11% of women died. Another 7% suffered permanent damage, hemorrhage, infertility, or organ injury. The most effective formula combined mercury sulfide, tansy extract, and powdered ergot dissolved in strong wine. The dosage was critical. Too little, and the pregnancy continued. Too much, and the woman died within hours. Wealthy women paid 50 drachmas for such procedures. The poor resorted to cheaper, deadlier alternatives. In Egypt, sex wasn't about human pleasure. It was a reflection of divine order. The goddess Nut arched across the heavens while the god Geb lay beneath her. Their cosmic union renewed the world each day. Egyptian art shows humans reenacting these sacred poses during rituals. The Turin erotic papyrus, filled with explicit drawings, wasn't pornography. It was instruction, each position aligned with a deity or seasonal cycle. Spring fertility rites required missionary-style sex to mirror Nut and Geb. Summer festivals demanded a different pose in honor of Set and Nephthys. Sacred prostitutes were trained in these positions as part of their religious education. The Carlsberg Papyrus even detailed seasonal requirements for married couples. At the spring equinox, couples were required to have sex facing east at sunrise for 7 days. The summer solstice demanded outdoor coupling beneath the stars. Harvest festivals called for group ceremonies where couples swapped partners to guarantee community fertility. Winter rites involved specific positions meant to capture the sun's warmth and prevent miscarriages during the cold months. Failure to comply came at a cost. Skipping the spring rites carried a fine of 20 drachmas. Ignoring the harvest partner exchange cost 50. Contraceptives weren't only used, they were tested. The Berlin Papyrus describes pregnancy tests using barley and wheat. Women urinated daily on grain bags. If barley sprouted first, the child would be male, if wheat, female. No growth meant no pregnancy. Modern science confirms this method was about 70% accurate. Estrogen in pregnant women's urine does stimulate plant growth. But more chilling are records of experimental contraceptives forced on slaves and prisoners. They were fed different plant extracts while priests tracked pregnancy rates. Silphium was the most effective, so rare it was worth more than gold. Pennyroyal worked, but destroyed the liver in 40% of cases. Rue prevented pregnancy, but often left women sterile. Mercury compounds killed more test subjects than they protected. The Oxyrhynchus archives record trials on 643 female prisoners over 8 years. Each received different herbal or mineral concoctions. Their menstrual cycles, pregnancies, and deaths were noted clinically. One entry is stark. Subject 47 died on the 3rd day after ingesting double dose of mercury antimony mixture. Cause: internal bleeding, convulsions. Child marriage was another brutal political tool. Cleopatra's sister Arsinoe IV was wed to their brother Ptolemy XIII when she was just 12. Another sister, Cleopatra Tryphonina, was married at 11 to secure an alliance with Roman senators. Papyrus contract from Elephantine showgirls as young as 8 promised in marriage, with consummation delayed until their first menstruation. Contracts specified financial penalties if the girl died before producing an heir, often as high as 100 talents of silver, enough to buy 20 adult male slaves. Marriage markets operated with ruthless efficiency. The Heian Archive preserves letters between wealthy families negotiating dowries for daughters aged 9 to 14. They discussed inheritance rights, schedules for consummation, and even medical readiness. One letter describes a 12-year-old girl showing early bloom. A physician certified she would be ready in 2 seasons. Her price rose to 300 drachmas if her first child survived infancy. Another letter discusses a 10-year-old whose hips were narrow. Doctors advised waiting until 13 to prevent death in childbirth. Sacred sexuality didn't stop at temple thresholds. It spilled into the streets during the great seasonal festivals. In Dendera, the festival of drunkenness honored Hathor with ritual music, dance, and ecstatic rites meant to dissolve the boundaries between mortal and divine. Participants drank beer infused with blue lotus blossoms, a plant prized for its dreamy, trance-like qualities. The goal wasn't debauchery for its own sake. It was to unmake inhibition, to open the body and spirit to blessing. The temple administrators prepared with the precision of a military campaign. Ancient papyrus records describe how barrels of beer, sacks of aromatics, and reed mats were made ready for the crowds. Attendants bathed the celebrants in perfumed water before anointing them with sacred oils, while musicians played hypnotic rhythms to sustain the ritual. Priests moved through the gathering, guiding prayers, correcting the posture of offerings, and restoring order whenever chaos threatened. For the temple, the festival was not only about devotion, it was also about economics. Entrance fees, offerings, and food sales generated thousands of drachmas each year. Funds used to repair sanctuaries, pay artisans, and support priestly households. Children conceived during these sanctioned unions were sometimes celebrated as divine gifts, and their families even received stipends from temple resources. Egyptian law approached sexual offenses through the lens of social status and public order. Adultery carried no universal penalty. Its consequences scaled with rank. For laborers, it often meant fines, lashes, or temporary exile. For the wealthy, it could involve financial ruin, confiscation of property, and public disgrace. At the highest levels, where dynastic stability was at stake, the punishments were severe, forced self-poisoning or execution by strangulation. Court records from Alexandria read with chilling detachment: petitions, evidence, verdicts, penalties. The message was clear: private passion could never endanger public order or the continuity of kingship. Even the dead required protection. Laws addressed the risk of mortuary desecration, imposing harsh sentences on those who violated bodies before embalming. The punishments, castration, forced labor, and public shaming, were designed to deter and to preserve sacred boundaries. Castration itself held a unique place in this world, combining brutality, symbolism, and statecraft. Temple ceremonies honored deities of self-restraint, and medical papyri described the operation with unflinching detail: incision, excision, cauterization. Survivors of this dangerous ordeal often became part of an elite cadre, serving as guards of royal chambers, auditors of treasuries, and messengers trusted with secrets. Their lives were highly structured: prayer at dawn, inventories by mid-morning, audiences and financial checks by afternoon, and night watches that kept the palace machine running. They were indispensable gears in the mechanism of royal power. Beyond the temples and palaces, Egypt's ports, especially Alexandria, were bustling arteries of trade. Among the most profitable commodities was human life. Papyrus contracts reveal a cold precision: names, origins, physical descriptions, suitability, and taxes paid on each transaction. Some were destined for farms, others for domestic service, and the most prized were trained for refined households, schooled in music, dance, or culinary arts. Processing centers examined new captives, branded them, and sometimes taught them skills to increase their resale value. Estates even ran breeding programs, recording pregnancies and sales with the efficiency of livestock ledgers. In these numbers, lives blurred into statistics, yet the records preserve their stories. Medicine in Egypt was both advanced and unsettling. The Edwin Smith Papyrus reads like a surgeon's handbook: injury, diagnosis, treatment, prognosis. Physicians experimented with linen sutures, animal sinew, and even twisted wire. They used opium mixtures and willow bark for pain, irrigated wounds with honey and wine, and noted recoveries and deaths with blunt honesty. Public demonstrations sometimes used the bodies of executed criminals, turning anatomy into spectacle and instruction. Though ethically disturbing, These practices improved knowledge of hemorrhage control, suturing, and infection, leaving behind a legacy of startlingly empirical medicine in the ancient world. In the ancient world, power and privilege always flowed upward, like water running to the top of a pyramid. The wealthy consumed the first and fullest benefits, while the poor survived only on what fortune, proximity, or chance allowed. Centuries later, beneath the royal court of Alexandria, archaeologists uncovered a discovery that revealed just how far this hierarchy extended into the private lives and even the bodies of Egypt's people. Hidden in a sealed chamber were bronze instruments carefully laid out as though waiting for their next use, rolls of papyrus stacked in orderly bundles, and the skeletal remains of women who had endured procedures that blurred the line between experiment, ritual, and cruelty. Radiocarbon dating traced them back to Cleopatra's reign. Chemical analysis revealed mercury, lead compounds, and plant alkaloids embedded deep in their bones. These traces whispered of concoctions once brewed to regulate fertility, to ease labor, and to push the limits of endurance. Among the papyri, one Greek scroll stood apart for its stark lack of poetry. It listed trials, protocols, dosage adjustments, and calculations of risk and reward with the cold arithmetic of science. Another scroll revealed something even more unsettling. Cleopatra herself was deeply interested in these experiments, demanding that pain thresholds be measured with precision as she prepared for her own childbirth. Some of the instruments still bore residues of dried blood, preserved by Egypt's dry climate, while one serrated speculum showed heavy wear from repeated use. A final record, dated to the last year of Cleopatra's rule, recommended sealing the chamber and destroying all extraneous notes. The words promised security, but what they really delivered was silence, a silence built on the sacrifice of lesser lives. History remembers Cleopatra as a brilliant queen, a diplomat, and a seductress. Yet the bones unearthed beneath Alexandria remind us of the human cost paid for her knowledge and her reign. Behind Alexandria's marble colonnades and gilded barges, an empire thrived on the exploitation of human bodies. Taxes on the sale of enslaved people poured directly into the crown's treasury, with each transaction, whether for agricultural labor, domestic service, or more intimate forms of servitude, taxed at 10%. Surviving papyri from Alexandria's bustling slave markets record just how vast this trade was. Between 35 and 30 BCE, thousands of men, women, and children were bought and sold, their lives reduced to ink on scrolls. These records reveal a grim economy of value. Young women described as unspoiled could command hundreds of drachmas, rivaling the price of a fine chariot. Skilled dancers, entertainers, and musicians were prized nearly as highly. Meanwhile, older individuals, or those with visible injuries, were sold so cheaply they became disposable labor. To the statisticians of the crown, these were not human lives but ledgers, columns of names, weights, distinguishing marks, and prices. And yet within those sterile columns lived stories. Families torn apart, alliances forged, lives redirected forever by the invisible hand of state profit. Some of the wealthiest estates in Egypt went further, operating what might be called reproductive programs. Enslaved men and women were paired not out of affection, but with the expectation that their children would be raised as future laborers or sold to other households. Temple archives tracked these births and survival rates year by year, noting every outcome with chilling detachment. Infant mortality was heartbreakingly common, yet recorded clinically, died of fever, lost in accident, survived. Of the children who lived, futures were determined almost immediately. Physical beauty might place a child in service within an elite home, while strong limbs destined another for endless toil in the fields. The system was efficient, dehumanizing, and entirely accepted as part of building dynastic wealth. Egyptian papyri do not only reveal rituals, contracts, and taxes. They also preserve what can only be described as medical casebooks. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, for instance, cataloged injuries and treatments with remarkable surgical precision, listing prognosis and prescribed interventions like the logbook of a modern hospital. Later documents reveal an evolving, experimental approach to medicine, even addressing injuries caused by violence and sexual assault. Physicians tested different materials for stitching wounds, linen thread, animal sinew, even thin bronze wire. They experimented with poultices made from honey and wine, known for their antiseptic qualities, and opium mixtures for pain relief. Some patients recovered, many did not. Yet each case was logged, building a database of knowledge that slowly, painfully advanced medicine. For the wealthy, these advancements offered a better chance at survival. For the poor, for enslaved people, and for condemned criminals, their bodies often became the raw material of science. Anatomical knowledge progressed, not just through living patients, but also through the bodies of the dead. Executed criminals and enslaved individuals were dissected in public demonstrations, where priests explained each organ as evidence of divine craftsmanship. Audiences paid for the privilege of witnessing these lessons, transforming anatomy into both spectacle and pedagogy. The Ebers papyrus even mapped the reproductive organs with surprising accuracy, evidence of just how far Egyptian inquiry ventured into the mysteries of the human body. When archaeologists unearthed the sealed chamber beneath Alexandria in 1998, all these threads of history converged. The room contained medical tools, papyrus scrolls, and the remains of more than 50 women. Their bones bore the marks of repeated pregnancies, malnutrition, and invasive procedures. Chemical analysis revealed once again the fingerprints of mercury, lead, and plant alkaloids, substances mixed into experimental medicines. The papyri left no room for doubt. They described fertility trials, pain thresholds, and forced consciousness during procedures so that responses could be measured. One scroll even named Cleopatra herself as a participant, demanding clear data to prepare for her own childbirth. Bronze probes and serrated instruments still bore microscopic traces of blood. The final entry in the archive read, "The queen is secured. The chamber is sealed. The records destroyed." Yet the chamber remained intact, hidden until its rediscovery centuries later. Egyptian society blurred every boundary between medicine and magic, law and ritual, intimacy and state control. Sexuality was not a private affair, but a matter of cosmic order. Taxes, punishments, and rights all reinforced the same principle. The body was property, regulated and monetized. Eunuchs, often victims of castration, were sacralized into service in palaces and temples, embodying sacrifice while administering empire. Even desecration of a corpse was considered more than a crime. It was a threat to the cosmic balance of Ma'at, the eternal justice that Egypt sought to maintain. Festivals of ecstasy, arranged marriages, and sacred punishments all revolved around this same logic, personal desire bent to the service of dynasty, deity, or treasury. Some practices of Egyptian medicine strike us today as ingenious. The barley pregnancy test, for instance, has been proven by modern science to yield reasonably accurate results. Other methods, like the use of toxic metals in contraception, horrify us with their cruelty. Yet all of these fragments, medical papyri, skeletal remains, court records, temple archives, together form a mosaic of a civilization grappling with fertility, inheritance, and the sacred in ways that were at once brilliant and brutal. When Cleopatra comes to mind, we often picture her draped in jewels, dazzling Caesar and Antony with her beauty and wit. But the quieter records of history, the papyri tucked away in museum drawers and the bones buried beneath Alexandria, tell a different story. They reveal the hidden machinery of empire, one that demanded human cost behind the facade of grandeur. They remind us that even the most luminous civilizations were built upon practices that challenge our modern moral frameworks. And so, as we uncover these stories, we are left with a sobering truth. History remembers crowns, victories, and monuments, but bones remember the cost. If you value history told through the evidence left behind, through fragments of papyrus, through broken instruments, through human remains, consider subscribing. It's the best way to help bring more of these hidden chapters into the light. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Because while history often remembers the glory of empires, the bones tell us their truest story.